because this is the second best night of the series. Next week, we'll conclude the series with Via Dolorosa and the Ascension Day. So it will begin kind of gloomy, but then it will end triumphantly as the story goes. Tonight, we are journeying with Jesus to Jerusalem. The journey has hit a hiccup. I do not know. Can it be done by you? There's no picture. Oh, there it is. Tonight, what's going to happen is we are going to start with Jesus up here at Mount Tabor, which is where the Transfiguration takes place. And that's when Jesus makes his way south. To begin in John 10, verse 40, he went again across the Jordan to the place where John had been baptizing earlier, and he remained there. Many came to him, and they were saying, "John performed no sign, but everything that John said about this man was true," and many believed him here. That takes place down here. So, in a moment, we're going to have Jesus go to Samaria, but then he's going to make his way down here. And that really is fuzzy. When the days drew near for him to be taken, he set his face to go to Jerusalem, and he sent messengers ahead of him on their way. They entered a village of the Samaritans to make ready for him, but they did not receive him because his face was set toward Jerusalem. One of my favorite expressions about Jesus. He set his face toward Jerusalem. Well, go back just a second. So here he went down to Samaria, or the disciples did rather. They wouldn't receive Jesus there because his face was set toward Jerusalem. So he went back, went across the Jordan, and came down. Now, one of the places I went that is not really in this trip to Jerusalem by Jesus. In other words, he made the trip to Jerusalem at least twice, and in another trip, but how else would I cover it so I'm covering it now. It's a little out of place, but nevertheless, it's in Jerusalem. So this is called the Church of Pater Noster, and that is Latin for the Lord's Prayer. This is what the church looks like, and the cool thing about it is that there are tablets of the Lord's Prayer all over the place, inside and out, in all the languages of the world. So that's kind of a neat thing. Now, the story goes, the tradition is that Jesus taught his disciples the Lord's Prayer here. And he did it in this grotto that is underneath that sanctuary. This is how Luke records it. He was praying in a certain place, That would be there in Jerusalem. And after he had finished, one of his disciples said to him, "Lord, teach us to pray as John taught his disciples." He said to them, "When you pray, say, 'Father, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Give us each day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins as we ourselves forgive everyone indebted to us. And do not bring us to the time of trial.'" As you know, the versions of the Lord's Prayer differ by gospel, and that last part, that doxology, we add on to the end. I didn't go into the grotto. Just didn't do it. Okay, back to the trip. Jesus' journey to Jerusalem. As I said, we're going to start up here at Mount Tabor, which is where the Transfiguration took place. And this is the Sea of Galilee up here. So it's, right there. And then he came down. He went to Samaria. Wasn't received well there. So he went back to Bethany beyond the Jordan, which is this area down here. But that's quite a long walk. And then after he was in Jordan, so Jordan is this country over here, of course. Then he goes to Jericho, which is there. And then Bethany, and really Bethany, Bethphage, and Jerusalem are all within a few miles of each other. This is another digression. I don't know how to tell you about the Dead Sea because as far as Scripture goes, Jesus never went to the Dead Sea. I'm sure he did. It wasn't very far away, and it's quite an interesting place, so I thought I'd tell you about it. This is my bus ride down there. And I obviously have never seen the Dead Sea, didn't know what to expect, but it's really quite beautiful, isn't it? You should know that all this here was underwater not that many years ago. It is so hot and arid down there that they're losing the Dead Sea by measurable amounts every year. Okay. If you weren't aware of it, the Dead Sea is the lowest place on Earth. On Earth. It's 420 feet below sea level. One of the, it's not a selfie, but I'm not a big fan of taking pictures of myself. But my roommate, Jim, everybody say hi, Jim.
Hi, Jim.
Because he watches this. We had this deal, he'd take pictures of me, I'd take pictures of him. Anyway, here we are. Welcome to the lowest place on Earth, and this is the lowest bar in the world. No, I did not have a beer there. Anybody who knows me and has ever been to the pool or the lake or something, I cannot float. I cannot back float at all, except in the Dead Sea. It is a very muddy bottom. They warned us to bring like swim shoes or something that you could wear in there because the bottom is both muddy and crystalline. That's your choices. It's not rocky, it's crystalline, and so it's got like sharp crystals of salt in there. And so you got to be careful about that. This is most of my group here and here, and we're just enjoying ourselves here. So here's this thing. It's so salty that the only way you can float on your stomach is if you really were trying constantly, like trying to hold yourself down. Because your lungs are on your front side and you'll just automatically flip over. So I think it would be pretty much impossible to drown in the Dead Sea unless you were really trying. And they do have lifeguards there, but it's not to keep you from drowning or to save you. It's because the salt water is dangerous. You can't get it in your eyes or your mouth, and if you swallow it, you're probably going to throw up. It is that thick. It is a strange feeling. Anybody here been there? Oh, then I can say anything I want. It feels kind of slimy. It feels kind of slippery. Anyway, even I can float. Now, they say, and there are places down there along the banks of the Dead Sea that are health spas. And you go there and they will cover you with mud. And then they'll sell you the mud and the salt crystals and all this stuff, and it's supposed to be good for you, and it's very, very expensive. Well, we didn't have to go that far, so this is me, the brown guy right here. And no, we're not. This is actually a salt bar. And as you can see, it's fully underwater, so as I was going out, I fell over it and scraped up my shin, and you know it right away in the salt water. So several of us tried the mud treatment, and I'm no better for it. Okay, all the way down to the Dead Sea, and really even around Jerusalem, not so much north of Jerusalem to Galilee, there are these Bedouin communities. Bedouins are Arab vagabonds. You've probably heard the term before, Bedouin, and they were people that didn't have a home. They just kept traveling, constantly traveling. And when Israel was formed in 1948, and it was already a contentious state, being the Palestinians and the Jews trying to coexist in the same place, by law, Israel said the Bedouins have to stay put. No longer can you just be wandering around. So they formed these little shabby, shacky communities, and we're right on Highway 90 heading down south, and there they are right on the road. And what do they do? I'm so glad you asked. They're mostly shepherds. So there are still shepherds in Israel today. And this is a guy on a donkey or a mule up there, keeping watch over his flock by day. And so there we have the Bedouin. So I asked our guide, I said, well, don't you feel sorry for them? I mean, don't you have, like, social network, or, I mean, not social network, but social services that will help these people do better? And he said, how much did your cell phone cost? And I said, probably about $1,000. And he said, yeah, they don't have cell phones. They feel sorry for you. They're not encumbered by car payments and insurance and gas, and they don't worry about rent and all that kind of thing. They just live like this. It looks pretty uncomfortable to me, but that's their choice. Okay, back when I was a college student, we called the Arabs camel jockeys, and now I are one. Yeah, that's me there. On the way down to the Dead Sea, there was, I mean, this is a tourist trap. It was at a gas station, convenience store, market, little restaurant there, and our tour intentionally stopped there. And this was later in the pilgrimage, and many of my fellow pilgrims had spent the money to get a turban or a scarf down in the Cardo in Jerusalem, and to be honest with you, I was kind of having scarf envy, but I didn't really want to buy one. But for $20, you got the camel ride, and they wrapped your head, and you got to keep the scarf. So for $20, I'll do it. So they kneel down, and you climb on, and then you better hang on, because they, as I recall, I think they pull up their back feet first, and then the front feet, so it's quite a ride getting up, but then they walk you around this parking lot, and you feel kind of foolish after that. All right, that was a nice digression. Now back to the subject at hand. As they were leaving Jericho, now remember Jericho is way down south into the greater Jerusalem area. A large crowd followed him, and there were two blind men sitting by the roadside. When they heard that Jesus was passing by, they shouted, "Lord, have mercy on us, Son of David." The crowd sternly ordered them to be quiet, but they shouted even more loudly, "Have mercy on us, Lord, Son of David." Jesus stood still and called them, saying, "What do you want me to do for you?" They said to him, "Lord, let our eyes be opened." Moved with compassion, Jesus touched their eyes. Immediately they regained their sight and followed him. I added this story because all along the way to Jerusalem, Jesus is doing real ministry. I'm only highlighting the places where the place he was is named so that you can follow along. When Jesus had come near Jerusalem and had reached Bethphage at the Mount of Olives, Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go ahead into the village ahead of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied, and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. If anyone says anything to you, just say this, the Lord needs them, and will send them immediately." So we are now at the beginning of Palm Sunday. And this is the Mount of Olives, and Bethphage and Bethany are just on the other side of that hill. To be honest with you, I could not get a picture of Bethany or Bethphage. There's really nothing that significant that is there that we went to see. But on the day, on our last day there, we made this trip that Jesus made, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. What I want you to notice here is that the Mount of Olives doesn't have an olive tree on it. The Mount of Olives is now a massive Jewish cemetery. Those are graves. And this is what they look like. So this is what you're seeing all over here. Those are all, Ezra says there's over 1 million graves on that hillside. This, by the way, is the Mormon University. Go figure. And this big tall tower up here is the Russian Orthodox Church of the Ascension. That tower is 64 meters high, and it dominates the Mount of Olives skyline. It belongs to the Russian Orthodox Church of the Ascension. It was built to that height in the 1870s so that pilgrims that were unable to walk to the Jordan River could climb its 214 steps and at least see the river. While the church is dedicated to the ascension of Jesus, an event most Christians believe took place about 200 meters farther west at the Dome of the Ascension, which I'll show you at the end of next week. This facility also has a connection to St. John the Baptist. An old tradition states that the Baptist's head was buried on the Mount of Olives and discovered on the site where this church was built. So, there you have it. I can show you the hole that they say they pulled the head out of. I didn't go there. I'm just telling you what it is. Okay, whoops, wrong direction. So this is the Mount of Olives. Not at all what you were expecting, was it? Not an olive tree on there. These are cedars. This is the Kidron Valley down here. We'll get to that next week too. Again, these are the graves that you're seeing. There you can see the Dome of the Rock in the opposite. So I'm up on the Mount of Olives looking across the valley to the Holy City. These things, these little holes in the end, these are graves similar to ours in that the body is actually 6 feet down. And this little hole on the end is for putting in flowers, gifts, candles. Some of these had candles burning in them. And then there is this Jewish tradition of putting rocks on the top. And it's just, I asked Ezra what that's about. Have you seen Schindler's List? At the end, the Jews put stones on top of Arthur Schindler's grave, which is in Jerusalem, by the way. We drove by it. I didn't see it, didn't stop and look at it, but it's right here. So it's a way of marking your visit there and reminding yourself and your family that that loved one is not forgotten. I don't really know what this is, but it's right there beside this. It almost looks like they have prepared this land for more of these, and maybe that's what it is, I don't know. These are ossuaries, and those are probably 1,000 years old. And so in the Jesus days, first century and beyond, when you were buried in a tomb, it was not forever. They were not forever graves. You were buried there for a year, and then over that year, nature did its work, and then on the anniversary of your death, the family would open the grave, go collect the bones, which are now can be stacked up in a little box. These are maybe 3 times the size of a shoebox, but that's an ossuary. And so you would be put in that and then put in the family grave. The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put their cloaks on them, and he sat on them. A very large crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. The crowds that went ahead of him and that followed him were shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David! Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord! Hosanna in the highest heaven." Words we will say in 2 weeks, 2 Sundays. So now, this is the Garden of Gethsemane. This is the Mount of Olives right here. That tall tower that I was pointing out is up there. It's not a very clear picture. I'm sorry about that. This is the Church of All Nations. I'll say more about that a little later. The reason I want you to see this picture now is because this road here is the route that Jesus took to come into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday. I walked that route. It's all downhill. Downhill and my knees, Dr. Duffett, not a good match. Whoops. I said that. So a better perspective of where we are now, that's the Church of All Nations. This is the route going up here to Bethany and Bethphage. The Mount of Olives goes clear down here. This is a superhighway, and all those big things are tour buses. Wow. Now, in that last picture, you might have seen this and wondered what that was. I knew you'd ask. So, it's the Church of Mary Magdalene. I didn't go there. It's a gorgeous facility. When we were up on the top of the Mount of Olives, you can see it through the wood, through the tree line, just like that. Obviously, it's Russian Orthodox, and but we didn't go inside it because it's not old and it's not. Mary Magdalene wasn't born there, died there, and it's just a church dedicated to her memory. But it's a beautiful thing, and I thought you'd probably ask about it. I failed to mention that up there in Bethany and Bethphage, there's actually a Lutheran Church of the Ascension as well. And it's also known as Augusta Victoria, after the wife of the Emperor Wilhelm II of Germany. And it's a fortress-like compound that is built up there. So that's at least 2 Lutheran churches, one down in Jerusalem and one up in Bethany. Okay, when Jesus came down the Mount of Olives and through the Garden of Gethsemane, this is what he saw. And literally, this is what you see when you're at the Church of All Nations. Let me go back. When you're there, this is right in front of you. That. This is a very significant picture here. This is called the Golden Gate, and that's where Jesus went through. In Jewish tradition, this is the gate through which the Anointed One, the Messiah, will enter Jerusalem. In relation to the Muslim belief, Jesus of Nazareth is the Messiah, it is suggested, and therefore Suleiman the Magnificent, who was a later ruler of the Muslims, sealed off the Golden Gate to prevent a false Messiah or an Antichrist coming through the entrance. The Ottomans then built a cemetery right in front of the Golden Gate to further prevent false prophets to come through, because it is said that Elijah has to pass through the gate, and the belief was based on 2 premises. First, according to Islamic law, Elijah is a descendant of Aaron, making him of a priest of a priest. Second, the Jewish priests are not permitted to enter a cemetery, you see. So Suleiman the Magnificent, a Muslim ruler, sealed off the Golden Gate so no messiahs could come. And then furthermore, later rulers built a cemetery there so that Elisha couldn't precede the Messiah. Interesting, huh? So this is exactly how it looks today, still sealed off. And I'm going to show you what it looks like up on the Temple Mount. So if you could go through those doors, you would come up through these gates here, up to the Temple Mount. Jesus went through those doors. So when the hair on the back of my neck stands up, it's because I walked where Jesus walked. He was there. No question about it. After Jesus went into now we're talking Palm Sunday, Jesus went down through the Garden of Gethsemane and walked up through the Golden Gate, up on top of the Temple Mount. Of course, the temple was there in that day. And he looked around, so says the scripture, and then he went back down these stairs, which are located over inside here, out these doors, and this is where the court of the money changers was. So, by the way, this is the model. You can't tell, can you? It looks pretty good, but that's the model. Because the real court of money changers looks like this pile of rubble. Here's the Golden Gate. This is now, I didn't take this picture, I wasn't flying, but this is the Temple Mount. This is the Golden Gate. Jesus came up that set of stairs, looked around, went out these gates, went down here, and cleared the money changers out. By the way, in Jesus' day, there were no trees up here. This is all something that the Muslims have done. Notice how dense the city is. This is that highway that's between the Mount of Olives. Bethany and Bethphage are way this way. And he walked down this hill and in through that gate. We're going to take a little digression to the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall. Of course, that didn't exist in Jesus' day, but I know you all want to know about it, and I couldn't wait to get there myself. Security is tight at the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall. These are Israeli soldiers here, armed with machine guns, just to keep the peace. Because the Jews and the Muslims require a separation of the sexes, even to go through security. We have the women's gate and the men's gate. Once you get out there, this is the Wailing Wall. And this is the first thing that an Orthodox Jew would do. He wash his hands at this little washing station. Yarmulkes are required, and so out here somewhere there is a little yarmulke station, and you take one and you put it on. I still have it. You'll see me in it in a minute. At the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, that's it. There is the men's side, and there is the women's side, because they can't be together. Interesting to note that all the costuming that you see Jewish men wear, there is none for Jewish women. So the men will wear any number of fedoras or yarmulkes or these big furry donuts. And then they have waistcoats and they have knee coats. They all have the prayer shawls that they wear. Women, there is no requirement. There is this fence there, and there are benches against the fence on the women's side because the men are quite demonstrative. You know, they're doing this thing constantly while they're praying at the wall. And the women, especially the women tourists, they want to see what's going on. So they stand on the benches and look over the wall. There's nothing to see over here. They're not doing anything. When I chose to leave, I came over here and I went over here and I'm watching. I'm going, well, they don't do anything. They don't wear funny clothes. That's why everybody wants to look over the wall. I'll tell you about this in a moment, but that's the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the three most reverent places in Islam. And over here, there is a study of sorts right into that building, and there are men in there doing the same kind of study. There are little tables that you can pick up and books that you can pick up, and you just pull up a chair and you put your study. It looks just like this, and you sit there and you read your Torah. So you've heard about all the little prayers being stuck into the wall. This is what it looks like, right in through here. Yes, I did that. I prepared in advance and wrote out a prayer on a little piece of paper, and when I got my turn, I shoved it in the crack. Twice a year. I can remember, I think it's Yom Kippur, and I don't remember what he told me the other date was. Twice a year, the rabbis come out and scrape all those out, and then they take them to the Mount of Olives and they bury them. They don't dispose of them. That's me. That's mini-me. This is the prayer shawl that I'm talking about. This guy, I wish I had it in video because he's really rocking it there. Here's one style of fedora and a long coat. Here's the phylactery hanging out, the tassels hanging out of that guy's coat. You have to back away from the wall. Yes, sir?
On your picture on the right, were those Americans or were they Israelis?
I don't know. I didn't ask them. I don't know. I simply don't know. The El Al plane that I took to Jerusalem was full of guys that looked just like that.
So it could have been American.
They can be. Sure, they could be from anywhere.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that? Yes.
No.
I have a special treat for you. So Shabbat is the Jewish High Holy Day, and so it begins on Friday evening at sundown, and it ends Saturday evening at sundown. And this is my roommate and I, Jim and I, and another guy or two, on Saturday night, we went on a walkabout through the city. The walled city is actually very small, and our hotel was only about 4 blocks from the Jaffa Gate, and once you're inside the wall, you can walk around, and never didn't feel unsafe. We felt safe the whole time we were there. But we found this observation platform, and we went up there because we saw other people up there, and we wondered what was going on. And it's, I guess, they celebrate the end of the Sabbath. And so the sun's going down there. This is open 24 hours a day, I believe. This is the Western Wall, of course. And this happened, and I have a recording for you. By the way, back here, notice, this is a minaret. This is the Dome of the Rock. This is the western wall of the Temple Mount. That's why it's called the Western Wall. So, again, Dome of the Rock, a minaret. I'm going to play a recording for you of music and chanting that was occurring at the same place at the same time. So what I did while I was on this observation platform, it was really just the roof of a building, I think, but there was this, I don't know, some kind of an obstacle in the way, and these girls were singing, you can see the Dome of the Rock right in the background. These girls were singing, and they're teenagers, probably, you know, like maybe confirmation kids, you know, a girls' club from a synagogue, I don't know what. They're, of course, singing in Hebrew. I didn't know what they were singing, so I asked one of their leaders, and they said they're singing a song that celebrates the end of the Sabbath. But right behind this obstacle, I heard something, and so I went around there, and it is one of the imams singing his call to worship, and I have it for you. If I can get all the technology to work here. This is the imam over here. Now you can start to hear the girls. So I walked back around. So the imam's probably not a song you're going to dance to, but I'm assured that the girls were singing a song that celebrated the end of the Sabbath. I thought it was a unique situation that I was in there, that I had these two cultures who were often at war with each other, both celebrating the same event at the same moment. Pretty cool. Okay, Jesus never saw the Dome of the Rock. It wasn't there until like 700, something like that. But it's there, and I know you're going to ask about it. So here I'm going to tell you about it. The only way for Gentiles to get up there is through this rickety-looking thing. It's actually quite significant, but it is a weird thing. And yes, you have to go through security to get into it. And it's down here, it's men and women and so on and so forth. And then you walk up here, you go through this wall, and then you climb up some steps, and you're right there. You come out right there at the dome. Oh. In order for Muslims to go either into the Al-Aqsa Mosque or into the Dome of the Rock, they have to wash their hands and feet. And so this thing here is a font of sorts, and you sit on these little benches, and you turn on the spigot, and you wash your hands and feet. Yep, there were some armed guards up there. Of course, they were Palestinian, because this is a Palestinian-controlled part of the city. That's the Dome of the Rock. And except for this dude who I got his hand in the picture, I took that picture. There was almost nobody up there. I was shocked. I was surprised that there wasn't anybody up there. Beautiful building, very colorful. This is the Al-Aqsa Mosque back here, and nothing around it, except for this one the Dome of the Chains, which I'll show you in a moment. Gentiles can't go in. So I have pictures of what's inside, but I got them off the web. This is the Dome of the Chains. And I will have to read to you what that is. The Dome of the Chain. Among the wonders of the holy house is the chain, which Solomon, son of David, suspended between heaven and earth, to the east of the rock where the Dome of the Chain now stands. The chain had one characteristic. If two men approached it to solve a point of litigation, only the honest and upright man could take hold of it. The unjust man saw it move out of his reach. Islamic tradition, in Islamic tradition, the Dome of the Chain marks the place where the end of the days, the last days, will take place, with a chain allowing passage only to the just and stopping all the sinful. There's no chain in the Dome of the Chain. I looked. There's nothing in there. I don't get it. There it is. This is what's inside the Dome of the Rock. It's a dome over a rock. Now, this rock is a significant rock, and people have been willing to kill for it for hundreds, thousands of years. The Dome of the Rock is said to be the place where Abraham tried to sacrifice Isaac, but at the last moment the Lord provided a ram, correct? Then, in Islam, it is the place where the Prophet Muhammad last set foot on the earth before he ascended. So it is a holy site to Jews, Christians, and also to Muslims. The temple was built on the rock. So whatever the temple looked like, it was right on top of this. Jews, Orthodox Jews today, will not go up onto the temple platform today because they would never want to encroach the temple, even if it's not there. The Holy of Holies, it is said, was built right over the top of the dome, of the rock. So you see, this is a very holy spot to many people in the world. And as I said, Gentiles can't go in. I took this picture from the internet. It's a very beautiful looking building. This is the Al-Aqsa Mosque here. So there's the Dome of the Rock. The Golden Gate is way over here. This is the east wall. This is the south wall. This is the place where Jesus ran the money changers out of the temple and probably went down those steps to get down there. Anyway, the Dome of the Rock obviously wasn't there in Jesus' time because the Muslims built it. I am told that when the Muslims came to Jerusalem in about 750 CE, the Jews had deserted it. You know, it had been a city of ruins for hundreds of years, and the Temple Mount was a wreck, and so they discovered that this was the place where Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac, and Muhammad ascended from there, and so they cleaned it up. And they built stuff, and it was totally uncontested. I often wondered, well, the Jews just sat by and let them build these things on their Holy of Holies? Nope, there were no Jews in Israel. It wasn't Israel then. It was Canaan, or Palestine, depending on what era it was. Anyway, back to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. That is like the second holiest place in Islam. Mecca is, of course, the first most holy place. I can't go in there either, but I have a picture. This is the entrance to it, and this is what it looks like inside. Pretty nice place, huh? Obviously, I got that picture off the web because I'm a Gentile. All right, next week we are going to talk more about Holy Week. Oh, I thought there was another slide that said, well, it should have been. Then Jesus went, so after Jesus came in to Jerusalem, went in through the Golden Gate, went up on the Temple Mount, looked around, went down through the southern wall and cleared out the money changers, he went back to Bethany. And that's where he spent his nights, up there, presumably with Lazarus and Mary and Martha. So, Palm Sunday has happened as far as our study goes, but next week we'll pick up with the events of Holy Week, and then the Via Dolorosa, which is a Latin way of saying the way of suffering, and then I won't leave you there. We'll celebrate the Ascension. Any questions? Comments? Okay. The most impressive, impactful, whatever question it was that you ask me every week, I'll tell you next week, because it happens on the Via Dolorosa. Please find your song sheet, because we're going to sing verse 2 and 3 now. We had